Martellus, how's it going?
Go pretty well, man. Just, chipping away the normal everyday life of a hustler.
I feel that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Where did we find you today?
I'm at home in Houston, so right now I'm in my condo in Houston, and I've been here for the last several years. So back with my home state, home city, hometown.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Uh, you were born on a Navy base in San Diego, which is also my hometown. But when people ask you, where do you say you're originally from?
Houston. Yeah, I mean, I lived in San Diego for a few years, but I've been here I was here for my most prominent years of my youth, so I grew up very much a Houstonian.
Are you a Rockets fan?
I'm actually not a fan of any sports organization at all. Like, I'm not a fan of any team or anything like that. I'm not really a big sports guy.
I appreciate that. Well, like many, I've been a fan of yours for a long time, since your playing days. And as somebody who played a lot of football myself, at least, Pop Warner through college, it's safe to say that thinking freely isn't always the first trait that people associate with some of those arenas. But that's another topic for another time. But the reason I bring this up is because of your last book, a book that I recently purchased and that I enjoy a lot. And for everybody out there, the book is called "Slices of Black American Life," and
Yes.
there's a verse. There's a verse in it from the first chapter, and it reads, "Sometimes I feel like the elephant in the room. Sometimes my intelligence is the elephant in the room. Who let all these elephants onto the page?"
hmm Yeah, that's elephants. Yeah, I feel like that was a very interesting poem to start with. This idea of the weight of being a Black American in some ways, and the expectations when you walk in a room, and being the size of a elephant, 6'8", whatever. I'm a large man, so when you walk in a room, you know the idea of athleticism is not the elephant in the room. Like, that's what everyone sees, but then when they start talking to you, then it's like, yo, did you know that guy's right there is really smart, right? It becomes this elephant in the room. So the idea of that was to um, articulate the situation of being in these rooms and being someone who prides yourself on their intellect, when everyone else kind of think about you for your athleticism, what you can do with your body, and not what necessarily what you could do with the mind, with your mind. But once they find out that you are intelligent, they don't know where to place you in society, because it's like they think one thing, but then the elephant becomes your true identity. Uh, so yeah, that's like the elephants. But then there's this, once they is uncovered, then all these other elephants start to appear, right? It's like, then it's like this, almost like I always remember Shrek when he says like ogres are like onions. And you think of onion, you keep pulling a layer, pulling a layer, pulling a layer, pulling a layer. And it's almost like that when you come through, when people first meet you through athletics. Like, they project this identity onto you, what they believe you to be like. And some of it is this heroicism that they have for themselves, because they too wanted to be athletes, and they look at it as this grand stature, like this, like, oh my God, you made it type of thing. But for most of us, that's over, like after you get drafted, and it just becomes your reality. So it's no longer the dream, but then you have to realize that you are living this dream that others might have had it to themselves. But sometimes you run into people and they be like 5'3", and I'm like, man, you should have picked a different dream. So that's like that's the idea of those elephants in a room, and the and when you start to express yourself, like how all of it becomes a whirlwind in those rooms, and you, for yourself and for others who are occupying the space with all the elephants you bring with you.
That's a great way to phrase it. I mean, who's to say that you need to just have one elephant anyways?
Right, right. We all are made of several elephants. Elephant's large, so it's like there's many parts of you that could be an elephant in a room, and it depends which room you're in, right? Like, if I'm in a room with my family, there's less elephants about certainties about who I truly am as a person, And there might be more elephants about, something that's happening within the family that someone's hoarding to themselves that we may know, right? Like if you have a family member who may be dealing with drugs, but it may be the elephant in the room, but no one wants to address the elephant, right? Or if someone is going through a divorce and, or, no one see that elephant is in the room, but instead of like addressing the elephant, it just kind of takes up this space. And what happens when these elephants take up this space is there's less room to converse, right? Like you have to talk over something, around something, but you can never talk directly to the person.
Terribly. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the idea of like elephant. A lot of times when people think about elephants in the room, they just think about a cute elephant sitting in the corner or just like this, but the idea of an elephant being in a room is like it's a huge thing. They ain't saying that we could easily say, it's uh let me see, armadillo in the room, right? Like, what I'm saying? There's an armadillo in the room. That has a shell, that has armor, that represents a whole nother idea, right? But an elephant in the room, that means like that's massive. This this thing is whatever it may be, is taking up a massive space, and we're all maneuvering around it and squeezing around and trying to land in a conversation or squeezing around it, not to, make the elephant make the noise the elephants make. I don't know what it's called, but the elephant trunk sound,
Right.
So
No, and of course, an elephant, like you said, is so big, and it occupies so much presence in any kind of world that it is in. It immediately conjures up for me, kind of just this notion, which I think all of us everywhere in the world have experienced, where people naturally want other folks to stay in whatever lane they think that that person, you know,
Mhm.
should be in, whatever. And I felt that opening to your last book so powerful because it immediately pushed me to ask, is this Martellus talking about himself, not just, you know, like basically forever and always, like going back to when you were, quite young. I get the
Mhm.
impression that you were always practicing with, what's known as Kaizen, like trying to basically step up your game in a number of different directions, whatever that may be.
Yeah, I think sometimes elephants get a bad rap in this when we use it in this language, because some elephants in the room could be great things. Like, like your birthday could be the elephant in the room. Like you can be celebrating. It's taking so much space that that's the only thing that we could talk about. Like a celebration, like the thing that you're celebrating can also be the elephant in the room, but we treat that elephant differently, right? Like we treat that elephant, everyone's touching that elephant, rubbing that elephant, celebrating the elephant, giving the elephant peanuts. But then it's like these other things about ourselves can be like these dark elephants, right? I think there's like two sides of elephants. Like to me, my intelligence is a happy elephant, but to others, it's like, oh my God, did you see the elephant over there? Like, so it's like depending on the perspective in which we look at these things. Growing up as a kid or as a writer, whenever I write anything, I don't think there's anything I could possibly write that isn't necessarily attached to me. But I also spend a lot of time, I write as a witness of my own imagination. So a lot of times when I meet characters and stuff, I'm just a vessel to tell you what I saw or what I'm witnessing. But then I try to write these themes within those things that are universal. Like I feel like having an elephant in a room is a universal thing. Everybody's family has them. Everyone has them in their life, and every room has an elephant. And the elephant could be ours, or it could be someone else's, or we could share an elephant, right? We could both have a body, right? And we done dug a ditch and buried his body, and the rest of the family, we got blood stains on our hands, but nobody else knows it. But we have to deal with the elephant in the room, right? And um, I think elephants, we die with elephants, and in some ways, that's a heavy way to die, right? To have your elephants, on top of your coffin, and everybody think they're burying one thing, but they don't really understand what's being buried along with you.
Mm.
So I think that when we think about elephants or the elephant itself in this theme of in that poem, elephants is um, this idea was my elephants that I bring into a room, which are because no one has taken the time to come to my zoo, right? Like the chaos that's within. Like, no one's taking the time to meet every elephant that I may represent in them. And since they don't really know me, it becomes those things that they don't know become elephants in the room. But sometimes you might be sitting in a room and you be sitting in a corner and you feel some type of way, right? Because it's like, man, like you see your own elephant in the room. And when you see your elephant in the room, but you don't want your elephant to be like this elephant no one else is noticing, like it's a big thing to you. It's like, how can you not notice about me, right? This is a big part of who I am, right? It's so big that like these are my elephants stampeding onto the page, like on every page, it's stampeding into the room through conversation. If you have a conversation with me, it just flows out of me like it is who I am. But like this assumption that if no one's never had a conversation with you of any type of depth or it took a time to get to know you, then like you got to keep your elephants. It just sits in the room. So I know there's a lot of different ways to think about elephants. I like elephants, and elephants too. They represent memory. Like they have these great memories, and like these are things that you have these memories as well. Like and memories themselves can be elephants. So I thought I think it's a really good poem. Um,
Well,
Overall.
no, I mean, like I said, it's just such a powerful way to open the experience of that book for the reader. And, you know, getting back to the elephant kind of discussion, as a customer of yours for this book, I also just want to highlight, again, being more than just a writer, more than just a creator, even just from the perspective, and I'm holding this up, I could not believe the level of thought that went into the packaging around the book.
Oh,
And
well, thank you.
it truly, so, as somebody who's been to Japan quite a lot in my life as well, uh, I know that the Japanese refer to this as, I hope I'm getting this correct, as satsumi, in terms of just putting an elevated amount of thought into a gift for the recipient.
Yeah, I think I think, if you take the time to buy something that, a piece of my imagination is basically what you're purchasing when you order something from me. Um, I think that and I'm still working on that. Like I'm trying to figure out the right way to do the packaging and the right way to do it. So there's like as I was wrapping a book, I have a finally came up with a Tomonoshi style for like the Watermelon Summers, a news book. It's a bigger book, so it's like wrapping it differently. And then like even with these other books, it's like what is the brand experience of buying a book from Tomonoshi Publishing? And I think about reading as a ceremonial thing, like there is a spiritual transaction that happens when you read a book, every book. It's not just my book, but any book. And I think of reading as a sacred ritual, right? Like we read in quiet places and we find a space to read, or we create a space just for reading in the morning. Like, there's not too many people that just like, I mean, you could travel and read, but like in our home, we probably have a spot we like to sit to read, whether that's in your bed or on the couch. Like it is a sacred concept, and like there's no TV on, there's no you might go to a park, sit under a tree. So it's like I think of reading as a spiritual experience. And when I first started making my first children books, I used to make this packaging for these books and like ship them across the world or whatnot. And as I get into these new forms and sizes and things, it's like if you order a book from, and it's like I got to compete. Like I know that I'm not an author necessarily who's like I'm not a mainstream writer, right? I understand that like my gospel, the things that I write is very much a unique perspective for certain people that are going to enjoy it. I don't think of myself as something for everyone to enjoy. I think everyone can enjoy my work, but I don't think that my work is necessarily for everyone. And once I accepted that, it allows me to allows me to build more, like do more, write more. And like, but when someone does something that is a part of this experience, I want them to have an experience from beginning to end, from the moment that it arrives, where it feels like, oh wow, I want to look at it and do those things. So like I played with the yarn for this one. And
Right.
then I got back to doing like, so finding new ways to wrap it. So it's always like, I'm working on that while we're doing it. It's tough too, because if you start, we sell a lot of books, it's a lot of time to go into that. But it's funny when I start wrapping books, everyone referenced Japan as far as the thoughtfulness, and it's like, should we only think of Japan when we think about thoughtfulness, right? Like, why can't thoughtfulness just be like the way that we all move along the way? Um,
Well, I would argue that there is, a certain element, for whatever reason, of this kind of less is more beauty that Japan is oftentimes associated with. And
yes,
what what was accomplished just with the yarn, right, which is a great color, that robin's egg blue, and then
that's exactly what it is.
right, right, and then you
Yeah,
threw my initials on this little sticker, which again, the less is more is like this perfect yellow sticker with the JC on there, little piece of tape to make sure the sticker doesn't come off. And as you can see, I've saved the wrapping, but you made the wrapping savable because also there's like that clay on the back that made
yeah.
things stick together.
I try not to use tape because I think it was just nicer to hear the sound of the sticky sometimes when it pulls off. So I mean, now I like, when I did a lot of my art, I use different levels of craft paper. Like when I'll do a drawing or something, and I use a lot of craft paper for my work when I'm working with Crayola. And like with the new book, I started wrapping it in the same form of craft paper. So I'm like, oh, like I have like, you start to realize like your brand touch points of things that you use over and over and over again. So it's like, oh, how can I make this the part of the big experience all the time? So it's like, oh, you have this craft paper, this paper that people don't really think highly of, but you do this artwork that is really beautiful on it, and that goes for, in a gallery. But then you see it used again on wrapping the book, right? So it's like, I like I like the consistency of the appearance, and I like craft paper too because it's the working paper, right? Like, it's not special, right? Like, it's it's you see it in butcher shops, you see it, it's the working man's paper. And I like it for that reason, because it's like, nah, it's like, yeah, we're doing beautiful things, but I think of myself more of a utilitarian than like and it's strong, and it's like
Functional.
yeah, it's functional and it's strong, so it's like, to me, it kind of represents me as a creator as well. It's like, oh, you could do anything with this paper. You could use it for anything. You could unwrap that paper and write and go do something else on it. So I really like craft paper as part of the brand. It's accessible. I also like that is because a lot of my work is represent black and brown people. So like, my packaging and, my car sleeves now is like black on the brown. So it kind of, you know, ties into the work as well. So, but I do love, like, I love two things. Like I love packaging. I love stickers. I love like this entire experience. And it's like, I don't want you just to get a book. Like, you order a book from Amazon, it just comes in a box, and it just, however it is, there's nothing special about it. There's nothing ceremonial about it. But like, I think, what's a lifestyle book, publishing company, right? And I think about Tominoshi Publishing in that way, like, oh, reading book is the luxury. Like, this the new it out. This the it item right here. It's not the shoes. It's not, those shoes can only do so much for you. A book can change your life. A shoe ain't gonna change your life at all. These, not like you, Dorothy, right? In the Wizard of Oz. Them things are just materialistic. But this is material, right? This is manifested imagination that you can actually become tangible. But my favorite thing about books too is that, like, we could read the same poem or the same short story and visualize it all differently. So now when we have conversations, the conversations expand. While if we're watching a TV show, we all see the same exact beats and everything, because it's not us to conjure up what's happening in our own imaginations. Since everyone's imagination is different based on life experiences and what we have consumed through our lifetime, how we see in our imaginations, it's totally different. Like, I assume everybody is black when I read a book. right? Like I think when someone reads one of my books, they should assume that everyone in the book is black until I say so is not. You know what I'm saying? But I think that a lot of people read to see themselves in these worlds. So it's like I find that to be something that I love about this craft and how many worlds you could paint in the same book, right? You could turn a page and be in a whole nother room and be like, oh, this room is okay. I can see myself in this room, you know? So
Right.
yeah.
Well, I on that note, it kind of when you go to Mr. Tomonoshi, your website, and back to this concept of kind of Kaizen, always stepping up your game, and at the same time, not, especially when you go to your site, you can tell you're like, okay, this is somebody who is willing to create, which first and foremost requires, overcoming a certain amount of fear, right? To just put something out there into the world, period, right? A certain amount of independence, a certain amount of self-actualization, whatever you want to call it. So, one of my favorite lines from your website, to quote you here, I started my own printing and publishing company so that I wouldn't have to ask for permission or be told what my books should be creatively. And I think that that's a very powerful statement, especially right now.
Right. Yeah. So it's like there's all this policing on language,
Right.
right? Like what you can say, what someone wants you to say, and then if you represent if like they like I don't have an editor, like I edit my own work. And there's multiple reasons for that, but I don't even want nobody telling me how to say the thing, right? And so I needed to build a space in which I know that I wanted to be a full-time author. I've been lucky, fortunate enough to be able to work in all these different mediums across the board, right? Clay or um, wood, acrylic, painting, sculpture, music, game design, web design. I don't think people realize that like I actually design and build the websites myself. Like I don't have nobody does does those things for me. Like I wrap the books, you know what I'm saying, myself. Like, cause if I have to do it at least the first several hundred so that I could teach somebody else exactly what it is. But if I'm just looking at it, I don't know how I want the book to be wrapped unless I'm wrapping it myself. So I'm a type of person instead of saying someone do it like this, I'll do it and wrap it and be like, okay, this is how we need to wrap all our books moving forward. I like that stuff. I like my brand is very personal and my writing is one of those things. It's like, oh, there's no material that I could work with that I can't that I this the writing and words is the only raw material that I could work with that I could make anything and build anything. So I think of language as architecture.
Mm.
While when I'm working with wood or working with clay, I have so many limitations
Right.
just because I don't have so much time to like craft it. It's like those are like you know, like when I first started, I wasn't really in the business of anything besides the business of making. But that's problematic when you're trying to build a business because no one knows what to come to you for. So I had to simplify the idea of myself and it's like, what do I want to be known for? And what is it that I do best? And what is it that I'm actually doing? And storytelling has always been the number one thing. I was just using different mediums to tell these stories. But the entry point was you can enter through the museum or you can enter to this idea, you can enter through the games. Now it's like, oh, if you really want to get to know what I'm about, it's best to have a conversation with me, right? And the best way for me to have as many conversations as well-rounded as I think of myself to be, then books are the number one way for you to get to know who I am as a human being and how I feel about the world, how I feel about people, and the worlds I wish existed. So, writing has always been the storytelling aspect has always been a fourth thing. But then it's like, well, let's not do it in so many mediums at the same time, right? Let's just focus on the written word, and like doing that, it's like okay, it's really cool because like spending my life trying to master language is something that like I'm at the phase of my life where, early on there was a lot of experimentation. And now I'm at the phase of my life where it's like, I'm ready to start working toward mastery.
Mm.
And what's mastery of like publishing? Like that's it's not just mastering the words, it's the size of the book, it's the layout of the words. Every time I look at a book, I'm like, I should have bumped this over a little bit. The margin should be this much wider. So like trying to actual master the presentation. I'm an aesthetics writer too. So like, it's like literary high art, so it's like, I write for aesthetics. I like the way words land on page and where they land on page. Like I don't really have any sentences that go from one page to the next page. If it doesn't fit on the page, it either has to get cut off completely, shortened, or moved to the next page at all. So I think about all that stuff like as a designer, like with language, and it's like, oh, this scene needs to end here. So um I spend a lot of time on that stuff too.
No, it's very clear that that's the case. So just to highlight some of the what you're talking about from a publishing standpoint, from an ideation and creative publishing standpoint, you're not to shower you too many compliments, but you are the definition of can't knock the hustle. And in this regard, correct me if I'm wrong, but to date you have sold about 100,000 books.
Yeah, in totality over the last several years, yeah. So that was the thing though. Like I got out of the books for a minute because I was doing, everything else. And it's like, man, what if I would just stayed and been doing it the books? I could be at 500,000 books in that time span. So it's like, like I'll do a book and then I'll jump into doing something else. So like now it's just like, oh man, I really like the way children, read my children's books, and I like when families read my books. I like when people talk about the written work or when it makes someone think about something. So yeah, I mean, that was a grind. Now like starting a full publishing company, I feel like I'm starting from scratch again, right? Because I had got out of books for a while and I was doing everything else. I was building furniture, I was working at Disney, and I even put a book out, my first in years, right? So then it's like, but I had books that I was writing. I just didn't wasn't doing the printing
Right.
and all that stuff. So it's like I have 25 books that's like completely finished
Wow.
already, just because over the years I've never stopped writing. It's just that I was not printing or publishing the books, and I was talking to different publishing companies, and I didn't really like the conversations we were having or like the way that they were thinking about books, and the return that you get on your work called ROI, your return on imagination, right? So it's like, um but now with the, I'm like, okay, cool, I want to get all those books out myself. It's like, oh, I could do this, I could build this out myself. So it's like I'm almost starting back at scratch as far as building a publishing house, because I don't think anyone ever thought about me as a publisher or like as a author. It's like, oh yeah, he did a book, but they didn't really think about it as like, oh, he's an author who's constantly writing books and those things. So like really just fine tuning the language and simplifying the idea of myself for myself and for the those that want to join the congregation and hear the Tominashi gospel. So um
And let me and let me jump in quickly. You mentioned the Disney collaboration, which, if I'm not mistaken, was a voiceover.
Yeah, so the Disney show is based on my first children's book, Hey AJ, Saturday, and Hey AJ's Bedtime. So when I did those books, I did those books out of this idea of reading all the children's books to my daughter and not seeing the children's books that represented her in the way that I wanted it to represent. So I was like, oh, I'll just draw it and do it myself. So I made these children's books, and then when she was getting older, I had built this website in which you can like it was like a pop-up book website, like the characters would fly off the screen or whatever, but it was built in Flash, and Flash died overnight. So I lost that investment on
Hmm.
a website that I built. And we had been working on it for months and months and months and months. It was really cool. Like the characters flew around. You could click on the character and more worlds will open up. And I think the closest thing to it, like Jim Carrey had this website years ago. I think it was still the best website for artists I've ever seen in my life. And I think it's still the idea for me is like the holy grail of websites. And and throughout that process, like what did that, then it was like one day I was holding my daughter and we was out there and she had a phone and I was like, I could just make books that move on the phone. I was always interested in like books that move, like not stagnant. And so I built mobile interactive children book apps. So I started building apps for voice acting, and all the characters will move and you could find there's like games inside of the game, inside of the reading experience. It would highlight the words and all this stuff. But I did that when screen time was still a thing, right? That used to be a thing, and then after COVID, it broke. Um, but so then after that, I was like, oh, we was watching cartoons. Then I was like, "Ah, dang, I could make a cartoon. Saturday morning cartoons is a big part of my childhood. It's a big part of my identity as a adult, right? Like Saturday morning cartoons was huge.
And I wanted to ask, is there a specific cartoon that you want to shout out that had like a huge, because obviously, I mean, who didn't watch Saturday morning cartoons? So was there one for you that stands out?
Well, so it's interesting because there's a lot that stand out, right? Like, and this is kind of how I got in animation. I have a really good archival reference point of animated scenes. Like sometimes even when we work on Disney, I'm like, oh, this reminds me of Street Sharks. And the younger people will be like, oh, what are Street Sharks? You know what I'm saying? Or and then what was the one with the cats that used to fly the airplanes and stuff?
Thundercats?
No, Thundercats was with the He-Man dude. Oh, those Thundercats. But there was another one where the cats were like they was dressed like military people. I can't think of the name of it off top, but then he had like gargoyles. But I was lucky because my mom liked cartoons. So I also grew up watching cartoons like Scooby-Doo, Tom and Jerry, which was one of my favorite cartoons of all time. Um um uh, what was the Bill Cosby show? Um Fat Albert,
Hmm.
right? I grew up watching those stuff, but then for me, it was like bonkers. So I grew up Disney. I really like Pixar was created for me, right? Like I feel that way. Like when those movies start coming out, that was like my childhood point. But I'm also a 90s kid, so Nickelodeon, Disney, Cartoon Network, they was like, they was really doing some things. And then you had Toonami, right, with Dragon Ball Z, Ghosted, and I was a huge Power Rangers kid. I really like so I watched everything from Dragon Ball Z to Tom and Jerry, right? So it's like if it was a cartoon, Bonkers was one of my favorite Darkwing Duck, DuckTales, that whole group, Doug Funny, Rugrats, Recess, um, what else was on those slots? Um, Cat Dog, even stuff like Cat Dog, Ren and Stimpy. Um,
Brandon Stimby, your legend.
yeah, so like I watched all those real monsters, right? Animaniacs, right? Then you had the Looney Tunes and all the stuff for Acme Acres. So I watched all those styles, and kind of like my drawing style is a clash of this Eastern philosophy of some of the stuff that they do in like very Japanese in some ways, but a lot of it somewhere between that and Tex Avery. So it's like if those two things, because like it's a lot more cartoony, we had a lot more cartoony, and theirs was a lot more serious and more realistic. So like when you combine those two things, I have moments where it's like my characters, I'm not afraid to have a real character stretch their arm across the room and come back with a jar from the kitchen, right? Like I'm not, oh, go get that thing. Like I think that's funny, right? It's just like, man, you, and then when he come back, like, hey man, I knew your arms was long, but I didn't know it was that long, right? Like that's a joke in itself. Like like so like when I started, so I did animation myself, so I started doing animated films while I was playing for the Bears. I did this movie called Zuvi, and then after I did that one, I ended up doing the AJ cartoons because like, oh, if I could make my own cartoons, then I could possibly sell it. So I did it, and then there was like a 5 year turnaround of like doing the book, the app, and then animation, and then selling it to Disney. And this has been about 4 years since it's been at Disney, but it's slated to come out early 2026.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, so I do voice acting on there, but I'm also executive producer and creator of the show. So I'm still in the writer's room and looking over everything. And it's a musical, so we have a lot of music. Although I still write a lot of music and things like that. I didn't write a whole lot of the music team was crazy. Like the cast is Janae Aiko, Megan Trainor. So it's a musical show and it's really cool. But yeah, it's been a while work. It's been about 10 years since I first wrote my daughter's 11 now. So since I wrote the first book, It's a 10,000 hour rule, right? You could say that in some ways, right? It's from the first book um to the new show on Disney.
Wow, that's incredible. And speaking of just kind of like, I guess, bringing all of it together, you have another section on your website that is totally dedicated to curriculum. So tell me more about the Mr. Tominoshi storytelling program and your ongoing contributions as an adjunct teacher at the George Jackson Academy in New York City.
Yeah, my mom's been in education for a huge part of my life, and um, I didn't plan on teaching, like, but I do think that a big part of my life philosophy is this idea of self education and searching and seeking information. I don't think that we should have to rely on institutions to label us as intellectuals or some type of paperwork to do it. When you could just go and study and discover what it is, you could build your own curriculum in real life. So, I was asked to come speak at the school, and I really like the kids. Molly, who was the teacher at George Jackson Academy, Miss Klima, she hit me on Instagram, asked me if I would come speak. And I went and speak, and I sat down with some kids in the library, and I really liked them. And then next thing you know, I was upstairs teaching them how to make video games, and then all the kids, like more kids, started coming in the room. So I had this classroom full of young men come in, and they asking me questions, and I'm just showing them how to build video games or whatever. And it was just kind of cool because all the other teachers, like, oh wow, they was really locked in. Because my teaching style is unorthodox. Like sometimes it's like I'm the type of teacher that Roald Dahl would write about, like Willy Wonka, where he can punish you, like out the room like that, but also like whimsical and fun. So it's like, so I have a and much like a athlete, right? Like a coach in some ways. I think about it just coaching the children. So I started off creating programs, and then I started writing. Once I learned how to, teach, I started doing more curriculums and writing exactly what I wanted to teach. Like every day in class, like the first year, Molly and I would meet after the class, and then we'll write out all the notes about like these things, and like she'll give me teaching notes and all these different things. And I was like, well, I think the course needs to do this. So I learned how to build curriculum through by teaching these ideas. And I had the Taminoshi philosophy, which is the core of how I teach. Um, but what I teach kind of is varied every year based on like my interests and like the kids and stuff I'm finding. So like this year we're building characters, but we're building character by building characters. So the whole idea is like to develop this relationship with empathy through characters that we make, but also a reflection of ourselves in the work. So we started off like I do a lot of, I love, I call them Tominoshi cons, but people call them emoticons. Like I really like the emoticons because we use them every day. We use the emoji every day. And it's like, if I could have a conversation, it's like, oh, your character is this, and they're sad. Then they have to think about why that character is sad in this moment. So we go through a lot of emotions throughout the day. But then in the middle of class, you can ask, has there ever been a time where anyone in the class has felt sad? And or raise your hand if you felt sad before. Anyone want to volunteer what made them feel sad? So then you realize that you're not alone in these feelings, and like other men, because it's all boys school too. So it's like there's other boys who feel sad, and you feel sad. And I think as men, if we have raised our level of EQ, then we can actually help change the world. But I think a lot of times the leadership lacks empathy for people, but they're not learned. Like, there's no empathy in football, right? Like there's no empathy in sports. Like there's no sports where you can empathize for your opponent, right? Like if I could beat you by 100, great. Like I don't care. If I get mad, like to show empathy is almost as a warrior. If another man shows you empathy while you at war with them, it's almost like, yo, like what's going on? But then you gotta think about this. That's not right either, right? You think about what's happening and Palestine, things like that, and just the lack of empathy, by those in charge. Right, the entire world can feel a certain way towards these things, or what's happening in the Sudan, all these other places across the world. It's like there's a, a core of the population who has empathy, but none of those people are in position of power to force change, right? Like, but sometimes empathy wins, right? When the world comes together and an empathetic point of view for, any situation, we can make things change. But we have been stripping away feelings because we've been dealing so much through the digital, and it's just removing this human aspect from society. So we could teach empathy to young men because a lot of girls are like, they're more empathetic as just creatures, right? Like they're just more empathetic creatures than men are as creatures. Um, so it's like, how do we teach young men, right, to not only um, become better artists, but also grow
Right.
their EQ along the way? So that's like what the class is today. So, I mean, this is my fourth year teaching. I enjoy it. I like it. I know my mom's, I talked to my mom about it. So I also think that I write curriculum for every book that I have, especially my children's book. These are like art projects you could do with your kids. These are like, like for everyone has different themes based on what the book may be. So I like to give those curriculums for free because if teachers are using it or parents are using it, if they're buying my book, it's like, yo, there's more you could do with this book than just look at the pages, right? You could take these themes because a lot of people are reading children's book with those ideas of teaching. So I don't like to write lessons in books, right? Like I don't like, stories that are like, keep your hands to yourself, right? But there are these deeper themes of life and societal issues that are rooted in the things that are right, or or there's other projects. Like sometimes I just write about kids playing, and I feel like there's a huge space for that. But then it's like, oh well, in the unicorn in my backyard children's book, you could look at it as this young black girl that's trying to catch a unicorn, right? And you could read it in that way, but then you could realize, oh, she's actually an engineer, right? She's modeling traps, she's prototyping traps, artworking. You too can go home and design traps on your own. What would you build when you want to catch your unicorn? Right. So like that's a whole design project within that character in that world. So it's like, oh, her side of the of curriculum is all design thinking. Because her whole book is about design thinking, right? From beginning to end. I love her as a character because of that. Then you have AJ, who's just like the power of imagination, and she's just telling this story. And so it's like, well, kids could write their own stories on their own Saturday morning. It's like, like what happened in your Saturday morning? It could be as wild and as imaginative as possible, but how do you do that? So
Mm.
like I believe that a big part of the curriculum is that. And I also believe that, with schools and, things like that, like having guidance on how to take something like this book here, and what can we teach? Like if we want to talk about empathy of elephants, right? That's a whole curriculum in the idea of elephants, right? Like you can talk about there's therapy. Like you can talk about, if do you feel like you have elephants in the room? Is there anything you want to talk about? So a lot of it's empathy based. But all reading is empathy based, right? Like if you read a book, like you learn to feel for others because you project yourself into these worlds. And that's why reading is important. It's why it's important for men to read.
Without,
Fantasy is.
without a doubt. Well, I think that that's a perfect, introduction to your latest work, Watermelon Summers.
Mhm.
Um, it has a certain kind of surrealist inspiration behind it, and it's told through the lens of a character named Coltrane Johnson III. So, how, first of all, out of curiosity, how would you explain this character?
Oh, very much so the book is an autoethnography, which is like it's rooted in anthropology. And so it's a study of people, of my people, of culture and those things. But he is a young man who is me as a young man. I just gave him a new name. And because he first coming home, like he lives in San Diego and he's going to Amite, Louisiana. So it's very much my story, but I just gave it to him. And like in the book, what's happening is I'm working from memory. So like anytime you're dealing with memory and the fantasticalness of your imagination, then you remember things quite bit different than how they actually happened. But all the book is rooted in facts, like the house is where the house is, the church is where the church is. And he is going on a spiritual journey in which he goes back to his family's hometown for the first time. It's his first time going to his grandmother's house, and his grandpa, whose grandpa's a pastor, their church is right there in their backyard. That's my story. And all the people in there are my people as well. So it's like someone in my family or someone there, but it's like I just wrote them in this through memory versus like, everything is like clear cut, like he was this tall or that tall, it's like it's not that. So um Watermelon Summers is interesting because it's like those 2,800 hours, writing that book, right? For researching, studying, writing, rewriting, and crafting every page and every sentence, worked, reworked, tested, and tightened, So it's just like you had this whole thing, and it wasn't really like this body of work wasn't really just about inspiration. It was really about discipline and just the craftsmanship of like writing and telling a story. So it's not really, and it's written through the narrator's point of view. So it's like finding his voice and how he wants to tell his story. And I knew I wanted him to be a young black boy who was extremely intelligent, um, as a teenager, right? Like he's well versed in culture and all these things. Cause I was like that as a young black boy. Like I knew about politics. I knew all kinds of things that was going on. Like I could sit at the grown up table and no one would kick me away. So I know I want him to be that because you really don't see that portrayed in books with young black boys as like the main character. And like there's like multiple themes of one dealing with the black theological imagination is a big part of how I wrote that book, which is this idea of like being black in the South or like being black and believing in God. At some point you had to have a lot of theological imagination because the world was not set up for you to really believe that things are going to change. In a lot of ways, things still haven't changed if you was black in America. So it's like this idea of this theological imagination and how vast that may be, but also the just theology of the black church versus the theology or white theology of the South, like the churches and stuff like that. So it's a lot of research and a lot of things that goes into like history. There's a lot of history. So like when I do history in my books, I don't want to like tell you like, oh, um, this is what happened. So it's like I had to do enough research where I can become the character that this is happening to and be able to give them the story of the history. So if I want to deal with racism, I ain't want to write like, oh, and people are racist, right? I wanted some uncle or some cousin to tell you his experience that happened to him so you could be like, oh wow, like it feels so real, it feels so grounded where you don't believe if you don't know to believe if it's made up, if it's fantasy or it is actual factual. And I think that's the beautiful thing about Watermelon Summer. So it feels like this surrealistic um history laced lesson, but it's also there's a lot of pop culture mentioned in it too, like musicians and authors and painters and like even like there's a part where I mentioned Duke Kaboom, where most people think about Duke Kaboom from Toy Story, but they don't really realize that Duke Kaboom was a toy, a Canadian toy back in like 70s, 80s or whatever. So it's like, well, the reader might think it's like, oh, this is recent, but they when they do their research, be like, oh, I don't know what, like you don't know what year the book takes place in. So I did it like that because I knew I had like, I'm about to be 39 next year. So if I'm thinking about myself in that time gap, I knew that I had this big time period of maybe 30 years where this could be happening, where I could blend it in. Because when you go back to the country, everything is as it once was. But when you in the city, everything is moving, everything is fast. But it's like, man, I left this 10 years ago and that tractor still parked in the same spot that tractor was parked in. So I was dealing with a lot of memory echoes um, by creating this and then a lot of black mythology. Like I wanted to create creatures like almost in a Hayao Miyazaki way. So there's like this Spirit Away Totoro thing happening at the same time where all this surrealistic life is it's a bright and beautiful. I feel like it's about writing about the mundane of life in the country but trying to find a hook to make it feel um like worth reading. Like it's been there's times where I'll spend 4 pages writing about the screen door. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, oh, you'd be like, oh yeah, I know exactly what door he's talking about here. Instead of just like, like these ideas of, you take Narnia, right, and the wardrobe, and then in the South, their entry point will actually be the screen door. That's the portal. So just a lot of research like that, a lot of mythology, a lot of gospel, right? There's a lot of there's a lot of scripture and a lot of church in the Bible because he's in the South, and there's like I believe there to be this Southern Shintoism that I didn't realize the reason why I like Shintoism so much when I visited Japan and still in my life every day since I've been there was when I was writing this book, I realized that, oh, I come from Shintoists, right? My family is already in the South. Like my grandpa talks about the tree the same way someone in Japan would talk about the tree, or he talks about the land and the inheritance of the land the same way you would do in Shintoism. Like, and everything had a spirit, right? Oh, don't, this tree has a spirit. This, the, the flowers, the plants, the crops, like everything there's a spiritual aspect to everything in the South. So like leaning on that and what I learned about Shintoism and kind of creating a Southern Shintoism of my own, like, it's like a practice of religion that's like, oh, it's cool. So that book is like rooted in like the traditional church and Southern Shintoism. Um, at the same time. But it's also a coming of age story. Like this, he meets a girl, it's like it meets the girl, there's kung fu happening in it. It's like there's like a lot going on. Like there's fights, there's a I never wrote a football game before. And I wrote my first football game happening in this book while the kids were playing. And I'm like, man, I should write a football book because like I was like, oh man, like writing it was my first time like really dealing with football, but I like the imaginative idea because how well I realized. I mean, I always knew I knew the game, but to be able to write something so technical, but also like where you feel it's almost like Sandlot. But it was like a football game down the street, and why they was playing, what they was playing for, who they playing against, all that matters. But like writing that was kind of cool. In that book, so like every chapter is written as he was invited to a writing academy, the Tomodachi Academy, actually. And then for the summer, he had to write every single day. He had to keep a journal and write about his day. And so it takes place over 36 days or so from June 1st to July, 5th, or whatnot. And every day he keeps this journal. So he's just journaling while he's in the South. So it's all written through his eyes. Like even when he's regurgitating what someone said to him, he's trying to remember it, and write it. So everything is built in this way where I'm dealing with memory, but he as a character is also dealing with memory in the same way I am as a writer. And he's a writer in a book as well.
which is which is interesting, which is so interesting because historically that's really, before books even existed, that's how we shared stories with each other, that's how we shared histories with each other. It
Yep.
was required for, your older wisers to pass down a story that is, obviously got elements of other people's stories in there coming in from the sides as well. And so everything kind of the lines aren't quite as rigid uh
Yep.
back in that regard, in that sense.
Yep. That's very true. That's exactly how it is. So like African cultures, they call it the griot, right? Like, you have the griots of the family who's the neighbor, the storyteller, who keeper of stories. And, when I think about, Tominoshi publishing, it's like, it's the same concept, but it's like I don't publish other people's books, right? It's just like, because there's a very particular style, brand, and idea of how I write and what I want to write about. Once I start bringing other people in, that's like managing, like, and now I got to be like, I have to tell them what to say, right? To fit within what we want to make. I don't want to be that to anyone because I don't, that's why I started my own publishing house, so I didn't have to deal with this. So the thought of myself being the force that's coming down on other people to try to get them to write the Tomonoshi way just wouldn't be ideal for me in the long run, right? So it's really a archive of like I like the idea of my ideas and my life to be in writing, right? Where it's like, these are like when we talk, like I may say something like every time when we talk, when anybody talks, they're going to have a moment of brilliance, right? Like it may say, but the thing is, it's like there's no control. Sometimes it's just flowing over, they just, the words are flying out because you're so excited about the conversation. Like right now, it's like I'm have all these words flowing out, and hopefully I could catch the moments of brilliance that I recognize along the way. But when I'm writing, it's like, oh, the whole thing can be just the moments of brilliance. That's what the editing is, right? Like editing out the extra and then just trying to find that moment of brilliance in that sentence that I wrote down. So a lot of times, a lot of my work is spent like I'll write the way that I talk, like how we're talking, but then in writing, it's like I get to say exactly what I wanted to say through the edit. I can't edit our conversation, right? And like sometimes you'll watch a podcast or somebody do something and they'll click, 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 and they'll try to make it seem, but it doesn't feel realistic because it's like, that something is missing, and they try to make a point by clipping the pieces together. I prefer just to have the entire context of it so that I could kind of get a full understanding of what the person is saying. So when I write, it's like gives me that chance where I don't have to clip, 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 and then make something and feel like it's coherent when it wasn't in the first place.
Well, that perfectly. So I made a note here, I about Watermelon Summers. I think one of the most respected artists of this era, Mr. Theaster Gates, had a very powerful remark about your work, which I believe is one of the probably highest compliments any artist or creator could pay to another creator. And he says that the totality of your work in Watermelon Summers offers us a whole human being. And I find that so interesting, especially given our comments about empathy and technology and the spoken word writ large, because we now live in an era, as we all know, where we have so many people and resources literally trying to install or impart human-esque behavior and intelligence into machines. And having said that, I would absolutely argue that perhaps the hardest thing to do as a creator is to believably create an authentic human reflection in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's profound. I think that's a brilliant way of looking at it. I think for me, like I'm a very human writer, right? Like, um, I write real humans, right? I offer the full human experience. Like there's like, especially in Watermelon Summers, like the kid goes through, like there's a section where someone dies, a cousin of his dies, but he had just met that cousin for the first time. So he feels sad, but then he doesn't feel as sad as everybody else who lives there is because they're so close to their cousin. So he starts questioning his own grief. Like I feel bad for not feeling bad, but I feel sad not because this person has died, but because my grandmother feels sad and I feel sad for her. And like that idea, that's a full human experience, right? I could easily write him grieving the same thing that he's grieving, but he's grieving, not grieving the way that they're grieving, why he's grieving their grief. So like, sometimes in life we experience it in that way. It's like, oh man, somebody died. And it's like, well, I kind of feel sad, but I don't feel sad at the same time because it's okay not to have known somebody. But the loss of life itself is something to grieve and they relate it to you somehow. But it's like, so for me, moments like that, that's a full human experience, right? Like, and that's a difficult thing to write, like to be in a character's head and for him to be talking about his own journaling his own grief about the grief and what he's witnessing, and you have to have a lot of self-awareness to write. And I think sometimes when we're doing things like today's creators, they're not writing from a place of self-awareness, they're writing outside of themselves to make other people aware of their existence.
Mm.
And for me, it's always about I'm aware of myself and how I feel in a situation. I think about myself when I write. I don't think about other people reading it necessarily at all, right? You know, I think about the labor of reading, like the eye labor, the imaginative labor that it takes for someone to be able to read something like Watermelon Summers or any of my works. I think about that aspect of it. How much labor are they going to have to put in to read this, you know, this book? And like something like Slices is not a whole lot of labor because you could just pick it up and you could jump in anywhere you want to, and it's not like this connected narrative. Watermelon Summers is a lot of labor on the reader, right? Like there's a dedication to the experience, but I wrote it in a way where I feel that you could read it multiple times. Uh,
I was actually going to ask as well. Um, Coltrane Johnson III, do you see him? You said it's a coming of age tale. Do you see like there being a sequel as he ages or grows up?
yeah, I think that it's definitely a world that I'm not ready to leave it. I really like him as a character. I like all the other characters in it. I like this environment, and I like the I like the tone a lot. Like I like the tone a whole lot. And I think that this is the first book that all of my literary devices kind of collided into one space. You know, I have the spiritual aspect is in the Tomonoshi way, right? It's a philosophy book. There's like a spiritual philosophy to this idea of making, but it's kind of rooted in there. There's some short stories in there, but all the short stories are still rooted in the same idea of this spirituality of making. And then you have Black Thoughts, which is like this imagination about being black in America and like dealing with those issues. Um, in there too is fact-based research, you know, and also there's imagination that goes into that as well because as a Black American futurist, I'm thinking about what tomorrow can be like for being Black in America. So like you have the spiritual aspect, then you have this Black thoughts, and then you have Athlete, which is another book that is rooted in all the psychological aspects of being an athlete. Like it strips the athlete. It's all dealing with the mind and the body and the where the mind of the athlete is. And then you have slices of Black American life, which is like these windows into these whimsical, fantastical tales of Blackness. And those are kind of like isolated themes that I would say that I write. And then there's the aspects of like graphic novels and children, but there's some graphic novel moments in this writing, the way that it's written. But all four of those things really like the spiritual aspects and philosophy to the fantasticalness of Blackness to the psychological aspects of being the character themselves and other psychological aspects of other characters in the story and being rooted in Blackness and like, you know, in the South. So all four of those books, I don't think if I wrote all four of those books at first, I wouldn't been able to write Watermelon Summers at all. So it's the first one where I used every single part of my brain in one body of work to kind of like build this narrative or whatnot.
That's a powerful feeling, and I have to imagine what a gratifying emotion that is as well for you.
Yeah, I feel like it's like if I had to like, oh, what's do you want to know Mr. Tomonoshi like full aspects of him as a person? Watermelon Summers is the book. Yeah, for sure.
So you, I read one comment about how after you had a record-breaking season in Chicago, I believe it was 90 catches, 900 plus yards, touchdowns, which any player would be over the moon about. And he wrote, I think it was that you wanted to be the best tight end in the NFL and that you wanted to win a Super Bowl, and you've obviously checked those boxes.
Mhm.
Uh, Going forward now, what are some of the projects that you envision on your new set of goals, whether it's something with your brother Michael, with all the amazing design work he's doing, or a continuation of the books or new media projects or whatever?
For me, it's really about building you know, thinking about really establishing my work as a author. Like, when you play football, like, you can establish your playing style because you play so many games so often. People are like, oh man, he's a hand in the dirt tight end. He plays rough because you see it, you can repeat it so many times. I think in writing like one body of work, or it takes so many bodies of work to people to really get this idea. It's not like film. When I think about myself as an author, I think about filmmakers like Tarantino and Tim Burton and even like a Edgar Wright. Like, so I write more cinematically than I write like author. So I don't really use a lot of author references. But if I'm somewhere in this idea of like I love Akira Kurosawa, right? Like, the publishing house, my body, he made a lot of movies, right? So it's like if I can put out a body of work in which it's like you can, as soon as you turn the page, you know that it's a Mr. Tomonoshi book from beginning to end, what's that experience is, but that don't mean that every movie is going to be the same. So like I'm really interested in like really diving in and exploring this concept of like what's a Mr. Tomonoshi story, what's a Mr. Tomonoshi reading experience, right, from beginning to end. And that's where I'm really focused on, just like, what do we represent? What do I represent as a publisher and a house? And what does my stories represent? Who do they represent? And just like really trying to find better language and better words. It's no different from sports. I did a interview with a friend who just released her book the other day, and she was like, "Oh, I find it interesting because every time we talk, I realize that you actually write like an athlete. You don't write like a writer." And because we'll talk, and I was like, "Oh no, I just wake up and write." Right? You know what I'm saying? It's like, and I'm not like, I don't like, look for like these moments. It's like, oh, it's no different. Like there's days I didn't want to practice, but you still had to go practice at a high level. And, I think a lot of times as an author, you kind of taught not to do those things, or that work ethic is like, not that authors don't, chip away. I'm sure there's some authors who do, but she was like, you write like an athlete. And I was just like, damn, that's great because that means I'm very disciplined.
Hmm.
I'm very like writing to me is a ritual, right? Like I like the whole experience of it. I like wrestling with words. I like oh man, if I put the comma here instead of here, that lands differently. So like I'm really thinking about all those things. So I'm from moving forward, it's about mastering my craft as a author, and also my voice and tone, um and I'm looking forward to researching as well. So a lot of my books are rooted in research about things, and just to give it to a character, right? It's like I don't know what the character is going to be interested in sometimes, but then it's like, oh, I got to stop because some reason this character loves elephants, and it's like, oh, I don't know that much about elephants, so I need to go research elephants and then be like, oh, what part of the elephant does this character like? So now I could go back after a week of researching elephants. I could go back and be like, oh, I love this, what I'm saying, like this is about elephants, this is like when he's telling somebody about elephants, and then how can I use elephants as a reference for spirituality in some aspects of like this narrative. Um so yeah, I think there's this like, that's my thing. It's just to continue writing and write daily and build a library of thoughts, of my thoughts and of my voice, and also make the written word sexy, right? Like I want to make reading cool, and like I want the like a book that's $22, like this is a luxury product, right? I can I can paint a painting, and it could be thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and I'm looking for one person to participate in the imagine in the my imagination by taking this to their house and hang it in their house where not that many people get to experience it. But then when I write a book, it's accessible price point, and anybody who wants to experience my imagination can. And that's my thing. I want to be able to have all aspects of my imagination to be experienced based on what you're interested in. Like, I don't have a book on everything at the moment, but eventually, I would like to have like, oh, here's a book of my photography. Like I just made a photography book. You like photography? Here's what I think about photography, right? And it's like, here's a collection of poems for children, right? Like I have poems for children. Like I write so much, and I have been writing over the years that like that's my thing. Really, it's just about you know, getting the gospel into as many hands as possible for those who want to experience the things that I'm creating for them. So I find that to be really cool. I'm really dedicated to that. That's where all my attention is, all my time is. That's what it's all to the written word and to the book.
Well, I love that. And um, on that note, hope you don't mind me just laying out one more quote from you. And it goes like this. This is from your website. I believe that the most profound way to inspire others to chase their dreams is by fearlessly pursuing our own. Though our dreams may differ, the pursuit to capture a dream is a universal thread that binds us all.
I truly believe that. I truly believe that. I think that's sometimes I write stuff for my and somebody tell me, I'm like, ooh. And that's all I could put that in a book. If that was an opening to a book, like you'd be like, oh man, that's like if that was the one takeaway from a book, right? Like that's like right there. Like, my brother, I was laughing, I was telling like I spent so much time writing on that website. And if I take everything I wrote in that website and put it in a book, it'd be a good book.
It would be.
Yeah, so I think that to be true. I believe that to be true. I think even in your own household, right? If your children see you following your dreams, it gives them permission to follow theirs. If you live in a household of people who, if you live in a household where every dream is deferred, you're more likely to defer your dreams as well. But if you live in a household where it's like, man, everybody's dreaming out loud, and it's like we're dreaming together, and people are going after the dream and the hustle of the dream, I think that it does give other permission to follow their dreams as well. Like you can't tell somebody to go follow your dreams and you've never followed your own.
No question about it.
I mean, you could be like, don't be like me. I ain't go chase my dreams. You know what I'm saying? Like you don't be like me. You could do it that way, but like wouldn't you rather be the person? I would rather fail, you know, running towards my dreams than to instead of running away from my dreams. Right? Like I'd rather, die exhausted in the chase and the pursuit of the dream than to have died, um, imaginatively fatigued of like not, just out of shape, like imaginatively out of shape from not chasing at all. So anyway it goes, it's like it's either you going after it or you're not, and there's no in between. So, and there's also like you don't have to always run. You can some days it's steps, some days it's power walking, some days like, oh, it's a good day. I was like, look how much ground I covered today, and some other days you like, oh my god, it's up there so far up there at the top. It's like how I'm gonna get up there. But that's the thing, like the idea is to show up and chip away at the dream, chip away at the stone, and dig a little bit more every single day. And eventually, I believe that eventually dreams will come true. But sometimes the dream is the pursuit of the dream.
And you know what? That like you said about being writing like an athlete on some of those days that has to be good enough. And you have to be committed to honing the practice, honing the skill no matter what. And
Right.
and do it again the next day.
And this is the last thing I would say too. It's like sometimes like along the way, like for me personally, it's like I've done a lot of things and, I always had this dream, but then you realize like the dream doesn't look the way that you thought it looked. Right. You have to, you change your perspective and you're like, oh man, this was the dream. I've just been trying to, I don't know what I've been doing, but all this was a part of realizing and actualizing the dream. So it's like my experience in furniture helps me as a better writer, right? Because I discovered these ideas about fire. So if I write about fire, I write it through, so it's like everything is the thing. But some point you got to be like, okay, I see the real vision of, and that takes time. You have to try. You have to give yourself a chance. And the only way to give yourself a chance is to try. And I try and try and try every day, like, and it's like, oh, storytelling is your thing. It's like, okay, how you want to tell stories full time? Oh, let's do books. So it's the number one, it's the period's art form for storytelling to me. Like it's the most imaginatively engaged storytelling experience, right? So yeah.
and a timeless one, and one that more people, I think, especially these days, need to share that perspective of making books, reading, storytelling, human interaction as cool as we all know it is.
I would bet on books because I feel like the internet is going. You don't know what's real on the internet. And then at some point with a lot of these publishing houses, you're not going to be able to trust the publishing house either because they're going to just replace authors with AI and how what's their integrity going to be on that. But like an individual independent writer who has a thoughts and perspective, like you could trust that that is going to be a human experience. Like if you come to Tomodachi Publishing, you can trust that the reading experience, or Mr. Tomodachi reading experience, is a human interaction and human experience. Now, I can't speak for every other publishing house or what they're doing or what's going on, but I know that I sound like Suge Knight at Death Row. But I know at Tomodachi Publishing, right, it's going to be a very human experience. Like you're going to experience, like you're going to feel human through the entire experience of reading a book. You ain't going to think like you ain't going to look in there and read it and be like, oh, this is AI, right? You ain't gonna feel that when you read my work. You're gonna be like, man, how did God think of this? This is the silliest thing in the world. How you think of that? So I pride myself on those random connections between two things, as metaphors and things like that. So, but yeah, it's cool.
Well, thank you for your work uh, as a whole.
What was your favorite poem in the favorite story in the book? Was it elephants?
It was elephants, but uh, it, elephants was the one that made me, um, I don't know, feel like it felt like you were kind of peeling back a layer in a sense
Yeah.
from the author, which is why it was the one that I wanted to highlight today.
All right, good. Yeah, it is. It is. That's why I opened it up there.
Yeah.
So. I think that's the thing about writing every single book. I'm revealing more parts of myself and discovering more parts of myself. So I'm trying to get my wife to write a murder mystery with me. I don't know what a Tomodachi murder mystery gonna be, but she likes murder. Maybe I'll just write one for her and dedicate it to her. There's a cop in Watermelon Summers that pops up in her story, and like there's a lot of characters in Watermelon Summers that I'm thinking about giving them like little books of like episodes, like it was like an episode of just that one character in this town, right? So I'm very interested in that in the series as well. So um I've been thinking about having her have a case to solve in there. But we meet her in the book too, so she's really cool.
Well, it definitely sounds like all of the fundamental building blocks are there for it to be a phenomenal series.
Uh-huh. Yeah. All right, man.
Well, thank you so much, without a doubt, for your time today.
I appreciate it, man. It was cool. I enjoyed it.
Well, anytime you want to come back on the program, obviously, please do.
Okay.
You have a great day.
You too, brother.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right, peace.